Hop right into this. Welcome to the JRice Sports Podcast, episode 1. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing, so we're just kind of like keep my feet wet, kind of wing it slightly a little bit. So this first episode is going to be mostly about NFL more than anything, probably just NFL. I'm going to start off with the Super Bowl prediction beforehand, which at this point the Super Bowl was a week ago, and beforehand, I predicted 35-21 Patriots, which I don't think anyone predicted it to be such a low-scoring game. You've got the Rams' high-powered offense, one of the best offenses in the league this year. And yes, they have a good defense, but then on the other side, you have Tom Brady, debatably the greatest of all time. How there wasn't more than 13 points scored by the Patriots and 3 by the Rams beats me. Technically, I got the score right, but with just a lot different on the scoreboard. A lot of people have talked about how it's such a bad game, but honestly, it wasn't as bad. If you're just a casual sports watcher, you're just watching the Super Bowl because it's the Super Bowl, then yeah, I could see why you'd say it was bad, because sports nowadays has gotten to the point where if it's not high scoring, then it's not entertaining. Like in the NBA, even they do the rules and stuff that they change up all the time. Always goes into setting up where the offense scores more, because if you score points, that gets butts in the seats, which gives you a profit. So they're going to basically fight against the defense. Which, that being said, though, the defenses were outstanding on both sides, honestly, especially with Stephon Gilmore on the Patriots. He had probably not without a doubt, the best season of his career. He's always been a solid cornerback, number one, nothing too special, but I believe he was an All-Pro this year, which was a huge step up, and then he came in clutch in that dominating defense. Goff, I don't think would have played as bad if his offensive line wouldn't have just played like absolute garbage. Goff, I'd say, is a top 10 quarterback. Maybe you could debatably say top 5. A little too inconsistent for me, but he was on his back the entire time, and any quarterback, if they're on their back that much, they're not going to succeed whatsoever. On the other side, Brady did what Brady does, the short dump-off passes, which does work. This is what Belichick does. There was the first or second drive when he threw the pick, which was basically just his fault. Not a good decision, but other than that, he had a decent game, nothing too special. Honestly, I don't think Edelman should have been MVP of the game, just because the offenses were so just kind of shut down the whole time. He did have a lot of catches and a lot of yards, but he didn't have the touchdown, which I know is not a huge thing. But I think it should have went to a defensive player, if anything. If it was an offensive player, I would say him or Sony Michel, who got the touchdown of the game. Also ran very well throughout the whole time. As a rookie, though, that's also spectacular from Sony Michel. I was surprised he went in the first round, honestly, but without a doubt, that was a great pick in hindsight. I honestly would have given it to Gilmore over anyone else, just for the simple fact he had the game-sealing interception. Without that pick, maybe the Rams get in the end zone, maybe it goes to overtime, maybe it's a completely different game and the Rams win. Who knows? I'm not a huge fan of what-if scenarios type thing, but just saying, if he doesn't get that pick and the Rams score, maybe Brady doesn't get Super Bowl number 6. It's a Rams Super Bowl. It's a possibility. But he completely shut that down. And even his forced fumble on C.J. Anderson, he didn't get recovered, but it kind of just shows how good their defense was playing the whole time, and especially him. He locked down everyone. Brandon Cooks, who's a great receiver, was quiet the entire time. He had, I think, 2 or 3 catches. He had 2 possible touchdowns, which you could say they're drops, you could say they're great coverage, bad pass. I don't really know what you want to say there, but I would just say Gilmore was spectacular the entire time. But back with Edelman, I've been seeing a debate going around the internet a lot lately about whether or not he should be a Hall of Famer. And honestly, in my opinion, before this game, I think he would probably be give or take if you want to or not. But after this, I think it just kind of cements him. He should definitely be a Hall of Famer. Of any receiver, I don't think anyone's ever came up as big in like postseason play, Super Bowl play as he has, except maybe Larry Fitzgerald, who's a for sure Hall of Famer. So I think Julian Edelman's still on that same page. He may not be as great of a regular season receiver, but with postseason play, I think just with that speaks for itself of how great of a player he is. They don't beat the Falcons without that catch 2 Super Bowls ago. They don't win this one if he doesn't get open all those times. Edelman is a great receiver, and he may not have been like elite his whole career, but I think just based on how great he is, how solid he's been, he's always been a security blanket for Brady. If he's not a Hall of Famer, maybe not first ballot, but if he's not a Hall of Famer, like second, third ballot or whatever, I would be greatly surprised. Another thing is people have talked about if this was going to be Gronk's last game. I think it will be, honestly, but I don't think it should be. Gronk has had injury problems the last few years, but with even last game, just how good he played, Gronk is, without a doubt, in my opinion, the best tight end of all time. Definite Hall of Famer. I think he still has a few years left in the tank if he does play a little bit more. I don't think he's going to play that long just because his body's not really like built for that many more seasons. He's kind of slowed down a lot. But I think he's got like 2 or 3 more solid seasons before he like completely slows down. It's the same thing with Brady. I don't think Brady should retire whatsoever because he's 41 now and he's talked about playing till he's 45, which I think he could play to 45 definitely. He's shown no signs of slowing down whatsoever yet. He won a MVP last year. He just won another Super Bowl. I think he can get another 1 or 2 Super Bowls based on how dominant the Patriots are. Belichick, all around sports, I would say is probably the greatest coach of all time. Maybe Pop for the Spurs, but Belichick is a mastermind. People talk about how great of a coach McVay is, and Belichick, without a doubt, outcoached him the entire game and just showed why he is known as the greatest coach. It's spectacular how he shuts down defenses, is really creative with the offense, gets receivers open. I can see them winning as long as Belichick's there. The Patriots, I think, can definitely make the Super Bowl. The AFC, in my opinion, isn't as strong as the NFC. I think the Chiefs have a great chance of stopping them with Mahomes another season under his belt. I'm surprised he played as well in his first season as a starter this season. But I'd say the real Super Bowl contenders in the AFC would be the Patriots, Chiefs. I'd throw the Chargers up there. I'm really surprised the Jaguars played bad because I would have probably put them up there, but without a quarterback, they're not going to be in the playoffs. Probably, honestly, like those 3. I could maybe see the Colts. Maybe. That's probably it, honestly. And the Colts, it's if Andrew Luck can play just as good as he did this year, which I don't see happening, honestly, because they have a good team, but it was kind of, I'm seeing like a 1-year wonder type thing. They did end really well, and if they go on a hot streak, I could definitely see them making a push for the Super Bowl next year, but I don't think it's going to. In the NFC, the Rams, I don't see them going next year. I think they're definitely a contender, top 4 or 5 team in the NFC. The NFC is like stacked all the way through. You have this. I see the Saints making it next year if Breeze can still play how he always has. Rams, the Bears defense, one of the best we've ever seen. I could see them. The Cowboys, I'm not a huge Dak fan. I don't think Dak can lead a team to a Super Bowl or even like a deep playoff run. I think he's super inconsistent, not a great decision maker. Zeke could possibly carry it, but not in the playoffs is a completely different thing. I don't see it happening. The Seahawks, maybe. Russell Wilson can do some pretty spectacular things, so honestly, it's a possibility. But I would say it's probably Saints, Rams, Bears, and I'll put the Cowboys in there, but unless Dak does something that surprises me, I don't think they're a real contender. Honestly, if the Packers have a good offseason, I could see the Packers sneaking up there just because Rodgers stats wise, Brady's the GOAT. Talent wise, I'd probably go with Rodgers. Honestly, he's one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen. It just sucks he doesn't have a team around him to show how good he really is. Because with a real team, I think he could go to the Super Bowl every year. I think he's just spectacular talent-wise. My biggest surprises of the season, teams-wise, I would go with the Colts. I did not see them doing too well. Luck's been injury-prone. He's kind of coming back still. But then even they started off the season terrible. Their head coach, Frank Reich, I thought was really good. I thought he was going to have like an average season, 7-9 at best, probably like 5-6 wins, something like that. But to make the playoffs, almost win the division, and then beat the Texans in the wild card round by dominating the whole time, huge surprise. And with that, I think the reason for it is probably Darius Leonard was a huge part in that defense. As a rookie, I want to say 4th or 5th round pick off the top of my head. There's always like players who are drafted later on who just show out every season. The Bears have had it like the past few seasons. Honestly, if Aaron Donald wasn't as dominant as he was this season, I'd say Donald was Defensive Player of the Year without a doubt. Then second was probably Khalil Mack. The third, I'd honestly say, was Darius Leonard. It was completely dominant. Had a huge amount of tackles. I don't remember. I'm not entirely sure how he was in pass coverage, but just as a lockdown linebacker, shutting down the run every time, he was all over the field at all times. Was amazing to watch. My second surprise team was the Kansas City Chiefs, which I knew they were a playoff team last year. I did a prediction-esque thing for like my season prediction, playoff, and Super Bowl picks and everything of this year. I had the Chiefs missing the playoffs, honestly, and they ended up getting the first seed because I don't see how many people, I could have seen how people would be like, oh, Mahomes is going to be good, maybe even great this season as his first season. I thought he was going to be mediocre at best, honestly. I was completely wrong about that. I don't think anyone could have predicted near 50 touchdown passes. And even the Chiefs' defense was pretty dominant up until the Patriots' playoff game. And Mahomes led that team. He was all over the place. It was amazing. He definitely deserved the MVP. I don't think anyone should have even gotten a vote, honestly, except maybe Drew Brees. But Mahomes was just spectacular. And my third and final surprise team of the season was the Chicago Bears. They went from worst to first in their division. They won 6 games last year, 6-10, and they won 12 this year. And that was with Mitch missing a few weeks. Excuse me. Just because I think Khalil Mack changed the team on all around. I think Matt Nagy is a great coach, won Coach of the Year. But even with him, if they wouldn't have done the Mack trade, I don't think they make the playoffs. I say 9 wins. Vikings probably win the division, maybe Green Bay. But Mack is a once in a generation type of talent. They traded they traded a lot of stuff for Mack, obviously, but it was totally worth it. The Raiders weren't going anywhere. I think it was a smart trade from both sides. The Raiders can stack up on picks and kind of get players that fit more into John Gruden's scheme. And then they can build for the future because they don't have a lot of talent now. The Bears, they're still a young team too, yes, but then with Mack, that just made that defense probably from a top 10 to, I'd say, the number 1 defense in the league. Mack he missed 4 or 5 games, but even without him, it's kind of like the locker room presence kind of brings something. And they were dominant all over the entire season. I want to say led the league in interceptions. They had a lot of defensive touchdowns. I watched quite a lot of Bears games. I'm more of a defensive kind of person. I like watching defense more than offense, and it was just super fun to watch with all the touchdowns, sacks, interceptions, stuff like that. The disappointment, I would say, team-wise, there's quite a lot. The Steelers is my number one. The division was pretty good this year, honestly. Baker Mayfield, spectacular. Debatably the best rookie quarterback we've ever seen. And he missed three. He didn't start the first 3 games, but still broke the record for touchdown passes in the season with a Browns team that went 0-16. Mayfield, I think they could be a playoff team next year. I loved Mayfield going into the draft. I didn't think he'd go number 1, but I definitely think he could. He's just got that kind of it factor that like you can win a championship with. The Steelers, a lot of drama. Le'Veon Bell, even though James Conner was spectacular, Le'Veon Bell just kind of, you don't ever want to deal with that as a team with drama in the locker room. Antonio Brown had a lot of drama with him too. And whenever I'd say top 3 receiver of all time is on your team and he's having all that drama, that's never a good sign. Kind of ruins the chemistry, messes up everything. Big Ben had a pretty bad season in his standards. The defense was pretty bad. It was kind of hard to watch at some points. I still think they should have snuck into the playoffs. The Ravens made the playoffs over them with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, I think he could be good, but it's like a 50-50 type thing because with quarterbacks, you don't want them running all the time. He can throw for a running quarterback, but at the same time, he runs way more than he should. You're going to get injuries like that, like RG3. That was his problem. He tried scrambling. He didn't slide. He got hit a lot, and then quarterbacks won't last that way. I think the Steelers should be back in the playoffs next year. That's just kind of, since I've watched football, the Steelers are always that team that's in the playoffs. Another disappointing team was the Panthers, who started off like 6-2 or something. They started off like amazing. It was like, oh yeah, they're for sure making the playoffs. Cam Newton's playing pretty good. McCaffrey, is having a good season. And then they just have an awful end of the season, miss the playoffs. I'm not sure what happened in that, but it was a huge disappointment. Being like, if I don't know a Panthers fan, but that must be awful to be a Panthers fan in that situation. Whenever you can talk all that crap, whenever your team looks like they're for sure going to make the playoffs, and then they just drop off tremendously, miss it. I mean, yes, the Saints were a tough team in the division, but I mean, still, they lost some games they should have won. Staying in the division, the Atlanta Falcons was a huge disappointment. With that offense, you got Matt Ryan, Devontae Freeman, Julio Jones, Austin Hooper, first-round pick Calvin Ridley, who started off well, kind of dropped off. I think he's still a great talent for like a number 3 receiver behind Julio and Mohamed Sanu. I think injuries really cost them a playoff spot because they lost Keanu Neal, Deion Jones. Without the injuries, I would have said they definitely would have been a playoff team. Those are 2 huge injuries to a defense, but debatably the top 2 defenders on the team. A huge disappointment was the Jaguars. Last year they had Bortles and everything, and Bortles played well enough to get them 11 or 12 wins. And then this year he was just awful, bad decision-making, bad accuracy. The defense wasn't even as spectacular as it usually was. I think if they get a quarterback, they're definitely a playoff team. I would say if they draft a quarterback round 1, I don't know, probably sit them, honestly, because I don't like throwing rookie quarterbacks into it unless they're like really prepared for it. So I don't see them making the playoffs next year either. Maybe the year after that, or if they get a good free agent signing at quarterback, who I'm not sure who the free agents are at the moment. Excuse me. Maybe they could make a push, or if Bortles just spectacularly does well enough to get him to a playoff spot. The NFC North, the Bears were a good surprise. Disappointments, the Lions I expected to be pretty bad. They have some pieces. Matt Stafford is really underrated, one of the better quarterbacks, but doesn't get a lot of recognition. But again, didn't expect them to be too great. But then the Packers and the Vikings NFC Championship game last year, and then they sign Kirk Cousins to an $84 million contract, and he didn't play like terribly bad. It looked like they didn't have like a good chemistry going with him, Thielen, and Diggs having the fight in like week 15 or 16 on the sideline. I thought they would win the division for sure, even over Chicago. Even towards the middle of the season, I still thought they could like turn it around and win the division. And then Green Bay, like I said earlier, without talent around Rodgers, they're not going to make the playoffs. Rodgers, I'd love to see him with talent, just for the fact you want to see the better players in the playoffs because when the better players shine more. And Rodgers never has. He's only had like talent a few years of his career. Is kind of getting wasted in Green Bay. So honestly, I'd like to see him leave somewhere else. Don't see it really happening. I'd like to see it happen to get a team who basically just needs a quarterback. Like if there was some way to get him to Jacksonville, that would be amazing to watch. I think they'd definitely be Super Bowl favorites like immediately with that. But I don't see him leaving Green Bay, and I don't see Green Bay making the playoffs even with him until they turn stuff around. Disappointing players. Kirk Cousins was a huge one. Another one is Case Keenum. I think Case Keenum is a decent quarterback. I don't think he's anything great. He definitely isn't worth how much they paid for him, which I thought so whenever it happened. He's more of a system kind of quarterback. He worked really well with Minnesota. Minnesota had a lot more like pieces on the offense than Denver did. Denver had some, but it was Demaryius Thomas is getting older. Emmanuel Sanders is getting older. The running backs, Philip Lindsay was spectacular. That's probably a surprise, a bigger surprise too. But it didn't work. I guess it's the play calling and stuff did not fit Case Keenum very well. You could honestly say the entire Raiders team. I didn't like the John Gruden hiring for the amount of money they paid for a person who hasn't coached in like 10 plus years. I think he's a great coach. I think if they got him a cheaper deal, it'd be better. I think he's honestly trying to build his own team, so they're trying to turn it all around mostly. Once that happens, I think they'll be contenders for as long as he's the coach, but this is kind of like a rebuild time. But even the players that I feel like he's trying to keep their long-term, like Derek Carr, some of the offensive line pieces, just were really bad all season. One of the worst teams in football. Honestly, I think they probably were the worst. The Cardinals have the number one pick, yes, but they have no quarterback. The Raiders have a proven quarterback, so you should be expected to do a lot better than a team with Sam Bradford, who talent-wise is great, injury-prone, not going to win games with that, and Josh Rosen, a rookie who you could say underperformed. Like I said, though, you don't throw your rookie quarterbacks into action that early because it's never going to end well. There's a few times it does, but it's mostly a bad idea. Excuse me. And Blake Bortles, obviously, was horrendous. I'm not sure how he dropped off so far, even though he wasn't even good the year before. I think he could definitely pick it up a little bit. There's some pieces there in Jacksonville. With Leonard Fournette, a top 5 running back, some decent young receiving core. I think if he got a solid tight end, that would be spectacular for him. And the offensive line isn't awful, but it could use some boosts in some certain positions, which with that, I think Bortles could maybe bring them to the playoffs. I think they need a new quarterback. I'm not sure what pick they have. But they have the 7th pick. They could probably get a quarterback there. I think Haskins is going to the Giants, but they could definitely get someone else. Will Grier, I'm very high on out of Western Virginia. I know a lot of people aren't. I think he's just a college quarterback. He kind of honestly reminds me a lot of Bortles, but I just feel like he's going to do a lot better than Bortles did in the NFL. I wasn't very high on Bortles coming out of college. And with a quarterback that could change that team around completely because they have a lot of pieces. So one of the best young defenses in football, a solid young offense. They just need a quarterback badly. Talking about the award winners, at MVP offensive player was Pat Mahomes. Deserved it more than anyone. I I mean, yes, he probably should have gotten both, but I like whenever if they give MVP to someone else, give like offensive player to a different player. I don't like them winning both. Like Pat Mahomes MVP, Drew Brees offensive player, Pat Mahomes MVP, Todd Gurley offensive player or something. Aaron Donald deserved defensive player. That was a no-brainer. I think if Mac maybe played all season, maybe, but with 20 sacks as a defensive tackle, it's phenomenal. It's like never been seen. Almost broke the record. I really wish he would have. But Aaron Donald, again, a once in a generation type player. I think him and Mac, talent wise, are pretty similar, but I definitely would have given the award to Aaron Donald just on the season he had. Coach of the year was Matt Nagy, which I think deserved it. Frank Reich, maybe in Indianapolis. Lynn from the Chargers, I think he got second place in voting, which he deserves some votes too. He did really well with them. I think the voting went. There was no really surprises. Offensive rookie, maybe could have given it to Baker Mayfield. I would have given it to Saquon. Just he didn't turn the team around as much as Baker Mayfield did, but he's already proven himself to be debatably the best running back in football. I thought he was, of all the players I've watched going into a draft which I've done since 2011, he's the best player without a doubt in my opinion. It's just spectacular how good he is. Which I know you can get running backs later on, and it usually works out. Like with the Bears, with Cohen and Howard, Philip Lindsay was undrafted. Kareem Hunt before the incident was like a third or fourth round pick. Kamara was a second or third round pick. Excuse me. But I think you can't pass on a Barkley like that, even if it's the number 2 pick, just based on purely how good he is. He's spectacular. He proved how good he was. People probably thought he was going to be a bust getting drafted that early as a running back, which a lot of teams didn't like doing since the Trent Richardson thing, where everyone thought he was going to be great. He was a 3rd overall pick by Cleveland. Had an okay rookie season, and they traded him to Indianapolis, and then his career just dropped off completely. Defensive rookie of the year went to Darius Leonard. Derwin James probably should have gotten a few votes. He was great, but I think just with all the hype around Darius Leonard, it doesn't surprise me that he won. Roquan Smith could have gotten a few votes. Van Der Esch definitely deserved a few votes. He was spectacular in Dallas. I guess that's about it for episode 1 here. My next one should be coming out next week. This one I did a little bit later than I was planning on it, but the next one will be NBA related. I'll be switching off simultaneously. Like 1 week will be NFL, then NBA, then NFL. So it kind of gives me a break to give more to talk about for long term to kind of help me give ideas. I'll be probably talking about NBA trade deadline, All-Star, stuff like that in the next one. So I guess, yeah, that's me signing off. Peace.